Hello everyone, this is Elsa and Zohari and we're here for Tuesday Tea with Elsa. For any of you guys joining me today, I do this every Tuesday, and when the weather's good enough, I come out here and I sit with the horses to talk. And this week I wanted to talk a little bit about preparation. Zohari here he's 25 now, and he was born in my backyard. So, I can depend on him a lot. Zohari is pretty prepared for whatever life brings, and he's a really reliable companion for me. Now, the gate is open, and I'm hoping that Atlas will join us, but so far Atlas has decided that the hay in the other shed is better, so it might just be Zohari and I for tea time today. I like to give my horses as much freedom of choice as possible, and so there's rarely just hay in one place. There is hay in many places. Hi, Zohari. And they get to choose where they want to be. Do they want to be near friends? Do they want to be farther away from friends? In an ideal world, we'd have a big pasture and there would be food everywhere, but in the winter here, where everything is so wet, we are in the paddocks. So I wanted to talk about preparation, partially because tomorrow is the anniversary of the start of the trip across Costa Rica, where we filmed Taming Wild Pura Vida. And it's really sort of nostalgic thinking about that. On this day 2 years ago, we were preparing to walk across a country with 2 rescue horses, and it was pretty daunting. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about preparation. Andrea Wadey and I did an interview the other day talking about the whole trip, and I'm actually going to release it to the Taming Wild Patreon group tomorrow on the anniversary of the start of the trip. So that's got me thinking about preparation. And the fact is, you can't really prepare for everything because you don't know what's going to happen. Now, when I have a friend here like Zohari, who's 25 years old, and he's known me since the day he was born, we have a wide variety of things we've prepared for because we've spent so much time together. We've had a lot of different experiences, and we know each other really well. It's going to be different with something like a trip across Costa Rica with rescue horses who I don't know. How do you prepare for that? You don't know the horse, you don't know the terrain, you don't know where you're going to be. And that was the biggest challenge when we were getting ready to film Taming Wild Pura Vida, was how do you prepare for something that you don't know about? And what I wanted to talk about was the understanding of stress. And that's really where the study was for me in preparing for that trip. I couldn't prepare the horses because we were starting without really knowing them, but I could prepare myself. And here's how I believe it works. Stress is always going up and down if you are living a fairly level, organized life. There are moments of higher stress, there are moments of lower stress. It should go up and down like a heartbeat. And in the middle zone is what I call functional stress. And the really simple description of functional stress is when you are at a functional stress level, your friends still want to be around you. If none of your friends want to be around you, you've probably gotten either too high or too low. Now, when you get too high in your stress level, what happens is you respond to everything from a state of fight or flight. You either run away from it or you fight against it. When your stress is too low, you don't notice what happens around you. You become really oblivious to life. So being in a state of deep sleep is sort of a state of a very low stress. But there's also states where you're really frozen or really shut down, and you just don't notice anything. So functional stress varies depending on who your friends are and who you're spending time with. But a functional stress level is where you can operate in community. And that's what I try and teach my horses. That's the main base of freedom-based training, is can we develop a habit of working in a functional stress range? Now, within that functional zone, you're still going to have higher stress, which is better for learning, and lower stress, which is better for processing what you've already learned, practicing what you've already learned, establishing habits, things like that. So when we're at a slightly higher stress level, we focus. Our brain becomes very active, and we try and understand what's happening around us. If we get too high, what it means is we're trying to understand too many things all at the same time, and we get overwhelmed. And when we get overwhelmed and there's too many pieces and our brain cannot handle all of the pieces of information it's trying to process, then we start reacting instead of responding. And when we start reacting, we get in that state where we have to fight everything or run away from everything that happens. So, for the best learning, we kind of want to just stay right under that threshold where the brain is very active and the brain is trying to figure out and process everything without getting overwhelmed. But you have to have some downtime, okay? Stress goes up and it goes down. It's like a heartbeat if you watched it on a graph. And if it stays in one place for too long, it gets really erratic. So we want to have times where the stress goes up and we want to have times where the stress goes down. And that is where I wanted to focus for this subject of preparation. So before I went on that trip across Costa Rica, that was really my focus, is how do you help horses lower their stress if it's getting too high? And how do you help horses raise their stress if it's getting too low? Now, for most of us, horses are flight animals, and they're prey animals. So having a horse whose stress is too low rarely happens. Most of us horse trainers are focused on lowering a horse's stress because they tend to go too high more than they go too low. But the point is, if you have a lot of time, can you teach them to do it for themselves? Can you teach them to lower their own stress when they need to and raise their own stress when it's beneficial? If you don't have a lot of time, the question is, can you teach them to trust you to help them raise their stress or help them lower their stress? And this is a lot of what freedom-based training is about. How do I use my feel and my timing of my personal actions so that I can either help the horse raise or lower their stress, or I can support them in helping themselves raise or lower their stress? This is the preparation for making life with horses good. And I'm not talking about necessarily making it good for today. It's about making it good for tomorrow. And this is one of the really big points I had to focus on when we were crossing Costa Rica with Apollo and Zeus, is that the work that I did one day wouldn't necessarily make things feel better on that particular day. The work that I did on that particular day was going to pay off in tomorrow and the next day and the next week. And sometimes you have to have a little bit of faith that what you're practicing today is about the results of tomorrow. And I think this is one of... Hi, Florentine. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to tea. I think that this idea of preparation is one of the biggest benefits we have in horse training. When we try and have an effect on the horse today, right now, in this moment, we often overwhelm them. And when we overwhelm a horse, they're going to get too high in their stress, and they're going to start responding with fight or flight. When they start responding with fight or flight, we are going to need a halter to control it. We're going to need a pocket full of treats to manage it. We're going to need fences to keep them from leaving. When the stress goes a little bit too high, we need our tools to manage it. Now, crossing Costa Rica, we did keep halters on the horses. These were very new relationships. We did not want to lose our horses off into the jungle, never to be seen again. So we had to keep halters and ropes on them, at least for the beginning of the trip, because we didn't know them. And in the beginning of the trip, we were preparing them for the end of the trip. If you do things today that are too much, too overwhelming, you flood the horse's brain, you push that stress level too high, and then they have to fight against you or run away. If you are preparing for tomorrow, sometimes it'll feel a lot more boring, particularly if you're working in the low stress range where it's about building habits and the easy stuff, repeating things you already know, developing those pathways in the brain. It might feel kind of boring to prepare like that, but it's going to set you up for being able to do more tomorrow. Yeah, Teza, we all need these reminders. Absolutely. The work we do today is really for tomorrow. If you're doing work today for the results today, what happens is you're working right on that upper threshold of the stress zone. And if you can manage to stay in that upper threshold where the horse still wants to be with you, that's great. But if you find you keep pushing them over the top into too much stress and they're fighting against you or running away from you, then you need to step back a little bit and think about, what can I do today that prepares them for tomorrow? This is hard to do when you're filming a movie and you've only got 2 weeks and you're crossing a country. And I'll tell you, there's some times, those of you who've seen the movie know that there's some times when I got overwhelmed and my stress level got really high. And I wasn't really in a state where anybody wanted to spend a lot of time with me. Luckily, we caught it on camera. It makes for fascinating movie footage. But understanding how to regulate stress, how to bump it up a notch, or how to take it down a notch, this is what sets us up for a good life. And if we're really good at it, we can work today for today. If it's a little erratic and you don't really know where that stress is going to go, you have to think farther and farther into the future. What small things can I do today that are going to prepare us for tomorrow or the next day or next week? So a really pertinent story right now. Zohari here's 25. He's having a little bit of tough time chewing. I have a vet coming out to look at his teeth this week, and we're going to see if we can help him out. Now, I've had him my whole life. I don't expect there to be any problems with that. I wish I could have Atlas's teeth done, but I don't have the ability to sedate him yet. I don't even have the ability to touch him with more than one hand at a time. So I can't have his teeth checked, particularly because he comes with a history of attacking people. And the last thing I want to do is have Atlas put my veterinarian in the hospital. So we're not going to corner Atlas. We're not going to put him in a situation where anything's going to go wrong. Instead, every day I'm going to come out, I'm going to say, what can I do today that sets us up to be able to do his teeth tomorrow or the next day or the next day? And so yesterday I was actually able to run my hand, just one hand, but I was able to run one hand over all of the teeth in the front of his mouth and end on a really good feeling. And that was a really exciting moment for me. I thought, okay, we're getting closer. We're not quite there yet, but I am preparing him for that time when the vet's going to be able to go in and check his teeth and get him more comfortable. So Teza says, I found the type of food Lena eats really affects her ability to relax and focus and want to be with me. Absolutely. I can't read the end of your comment here, Teza, because only a certain amount shows up on my screen. But generally speaking, the food that they eat does contribute to their stress levels. And I find this is a really big issue with our horses in the domestic world, because most of our horses are overfed and under-exercised. And just like a kid who's eaten a lot of birthday cake, that stress gets really high when there's too much sugar running through the bloodstream. And that sugar running through the bloodstream is going to mean that their brain doesn't function very well, and they get overwhelmed really easily. So when there's a lot of sugar running through and you don't have a lot of exercise to balance it out and burn that sugar, what you have is a brain that's very easily overwhelmed. It takes in too much information. It can't process all that information, and then it goes into fight or flight. And yeah, Florentine, it is really interesting to think about it this way. So when there are all these factors that we put into working with our horses, some of it's what they eat, some of it's where they live, some of it is who their friends are, some of it is how much exercise they get. All of the factors matter. The thing that's most important to me is, regardless of the other factors, can I help them understand how to raise stress when it's too low and lower stress when it's too high, and work that stress up and down like a heartbeat really regularly? There's some times where we keep the stress very low. There's some times where we keep the stress a little higher, but we try and work it within the functional zone. That is your preparation for a good life. If you know how to raise or lower the stress, then regardless of the other factors, because you can't always control who their friends are. You can't always give them all the exercise they need. You can't always control what they eat. There's a lot of things we can't control. But if we can educate them in managing their emotions to the point where they know how to self-regulate, or they know how to lean on us a little bit so that we can help them regulate, life gets a lot better. And that's essentially what we did crossing Costa Rica. Is Andrea and I worked every day as we were walking across the country with Apollo and Zeus. And we worked every day to help those horses either lean on us to regulate their stress levels or to regulate their own stress levels. The more they're in the functional zone, the more their friends want to spend time with them, and the better life gets. So if you guys are interested, I'm going to release to the Taming Wild Patreon group tomorrow an interview that Andrea and I did about the trip. It's kind of interesting stuff. It was really fun to go back and reminisce. I can't believe it's been 2 years since we did the journey. Obviously the movie's made now, so if you haven't seen the movie, you can buy it via tamingwild.com. And I am going to keep working here on the third movie, which is Taming Wild Evolution. It was supposed to be a 1-year project, but turns out it needed a little bit more time. So we're now aiming for a 2-year project. Zohari is not really part of the project because he's been my horse forever. But he is companion to Atlas, who is part of the third movie, Taming Wild Evolution. So those are my thoughts on preparation. If you can prepare the horse to raise or lower their stress appropriately, then you can handle whatever comes your way, whatever life throws at you. And you won't know what that is until it happens. So thank you, Florentine. Yeah, you know what? I really have established that this project with the stallions is going to take a little bit more time. And I think a lot of it has to do with age. They're both 8-year-old stallions. The first movie was with a 4-year-old mare. And the older the horse is, the more sort of sure of their decisions they are. And that's really challenging me to take the slow road, smell the roses, enjoy the journey, and prepare for tomorrow. So, yeah, absolutely. If we can set their life up to be as good as possible and help them stay in the functional zone, that's great. But then let's also help them learn how to modulate it. And yeah, Teza, absolutely, the hay is part of it. I'm glad you brought it up. What the horses eat definitely affects how their brain works and how their stress levels are. So I'm going to go continue my day. I'm going to go continue to work on handling Atlas's face and his teeth and prepare him for the time when I can let the veterinarian come and file those down and give him a better chewing surface. I'm going to keep working with Ocasio and Ari, and Zohari and I go out for a ride every day just because it's fun. We've spent 25 years preparing for whatever life throws at us. And, it's really fun for me to go out and ride Zohari. We have a lot of preparation already under our belt. But I'm going to keep working on what it takes to prepare the other horses. And hopefully this kind of gives you all a little inspiration too. If your horse is overwhelmed, if they're getting out of the functional stress zone, We just got to break it down farther. Slow it down. Think about how we prepare them to be better able to handle tomorrow. So thanks for joining me for tea, and I love sharing this time with everyone. If you have things you would like me to talk about, please leave them in the comments. I'm always up for adding to my list of potential subjects. Have a wonderful day.